The mountain man's chestnut stallion threw its head back and bolted at the crack of thunder, disappearing into the endless Montana grasslands while Marcus Yates cursed loud enough to wake the dead. He had been checking his traps along the ridge when the storm rolled in faster than a runaway freight train, black clouds tumbling over themselves in their haste to drench the parched earth. The stallion, usually as steady as stone, had spooked at the lightning strike that hit a pine not 50 yards away, snapping his reins clean through and taking off like the devil himself was on his tail. Marcus stood there in the pouring rain, water streaming down his bearded face and soaking through his buckskin jacket, watching 1,500 pounds of horseflesh vanish into the open country with everything he owned tied to that saddle. He started running, his long legs eating up the ground, but a man on foot was no match for a terrified horse. The rain came down in sheets now, turning the grasslands slick and treacherous. Marcus had lived in these mountains for 8 years, trapping beaver and hunting elk, trading his furs in whatever town would have him. The year was 1878, and civilization was creeping westward like slow honey. But up here in the high country, a man could still live by his own rules. Those rules, however, required a horse, and his was currently halfway to Canada by the looks of it. He crested a hill and stopped, chest heaving, squinting through the downpour, nothing but grass and sage and the occasional stand of pines. His stallion had vanished like smoke. Marcus wiped the rain from his eyes and swore again, more creatively this time. Without that horse, he was looking at a 3-day walk back to anywhere resembling civilization, and that was if the weather cleared. If it did not, well, even a mountain man could freeze to death when autumn storms came early to Montana territory. That was when he saw her. She appeared out of the rain like some kind of vision, sitting astride a paint mare at the base of the hill. Even from this distance, Marcus could see she handled the horse like she had been born in the saddle. She wore men's clothing, practical riding gear, with her dark hair braided down her back and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the rain. She was looking in the direction his stallion had gone, one hand shading her eyes despite the cloud cover. Marcus started down the hill toward her, sliding a bit on the wet grass. As he got closer, he could make out more details. She was young, probably mid-20s, with a strong build and confident posture. Her mare stood calm despite the storm, ears forward, watching something in the distance. "You lose something?" she called out when he was within earshot. Her voice was clear and strong, cutting through the sound of rain. "Chestnut stallion," Marcus shouted back, spooked at the lightning. "You see which way he went?" She pointed northeast. "Big horse, white blaze down his face? That's him. He is about a quarter mile that direction, running himself tired." She looked Marcus up and down, taking in his soaked appearance and the hunting knife at his belt. "You are the mountain man who traps up near Copper Creek, Marcus Yates." He pushed his wet hair back from his face. It hung past his shoulders now, nearly black in the rain. "I am that man, Delilah Oakes." She turned her mare. "Wait here. I will get your horse." "In this weather?" "Miss, I appreciate the offer," but she was already riding away, kicking her mare into an easy lope across the grassland. Marcus stood there in the rain, water pooling in his boots, watching her disappear into the gray curtain of the storm. He had a moment of concern that he had just met some kind of insane person who would end up as lost as his stallion. But something about the way she had sat that horse told him she knew exactly what she was doing. He waited. The rain began to ease, turning from a downpour to a steady drizzle. The thunder moved off to the east, grumbling like an old man. Marcus wrung out his shirt as best he could and tried to ignore the water running down the back of his neck. He had been cold before, many times. This was just another day in the wilderness. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Marcus was starting to seriously worry when he saw movement in the distance. 2 horses coming back at a walk. As they got closer, he could see Delilah riding her paint with one hand, the other holding a rope. And at the end of that rope, looking sheepish if a horse could look such a thing, was his stallion. Marcus felt relief flood through him so strongly his knees nearly buckled. That horse was not just transportation. It was his livelihood, his survival, everything. He walked forward to meet them, hand outstretched. "Easy now," he murmured to the stallion, who nickered and pushed his big head against Marcus's chest, nearly knocking him over. Marcus ran his hands over the horse's legs, checking for injury, examining the saddle and packs. Everything was still there, miraculously. "You complete fool of a horse," he said, but his voice was gentle. "Nearly gave me heart failure." "He ran himself out about where I thought he would," Delilah said, dismounting. She was tall for a woman, probably 5'8", with a lean, muscular build that spoke of years of hard work. Her eyes were a striking hazel, more gold than green, and they looked at Marcus with frank curiosity. Saw the broken reins and figured he was a runaway. Lucky I was checking on our north pasture when the storm came in. Lucky for me, Marcus agreed. He pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. I owe you, name your price, put that away. She waved off the money. I am no thief who charges a man for basic decency. It is not thievery to accept payment for services rendered. It is if I do not want payment. She smiled, and it transformed her whole face, making her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness and everything to do with genuine warmth. Besides, you can repay me by coming back to the ranch for a hot meal. My father would never forgive me if I let a man ride off into this weather without at least offering hospitality. Marcus hesitated. He was not much for company, having chosen the solitary life of a mountain man specifically to avoid people. But his stomach reminded him that he had been living on dried venison and hardtack for the better part of 2 weeks, and the thought of a real meal cooked in a real kitchen was suddenly overwhelmingly appealing. I would not want to impose, he said, which they both knew meant yes. You are not imposing. It is this way. Delilah mounted her paint in one smooth motion and turned the mare south. The ranch is about an hour's ride. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rain tapering off to nothing as they traveled. The clouds began to break apart, letting through shafts of golden afternoon light that turned the wet grassland into something magical, all sparkle and shine. Marcus kept stealing glances at the woman riding beside him. She sat her horse like she was part of it, moving with the mare's rhythm as naturally as breathing. Her hands on the reins were work roughened and capable, with short nails and calluses that spoke of rope work and hard labor. You said north pasture, Marcus ventured. Your family runs cattle? Cattle and horses, Delilah confirmed. About 200 head of cattle, 30 horses. It is my father, my younger brother Danny, and me. We have been here 6 years since after my mother passed. He said it matter-of-factly, but Marcus heard the old grief underneath. What about you? You have been up in the mountains long? 8 years, Marcus said. Came out from Ohio after the war. Could not settle back into regular life after that. He did not elaborate on which war or what he had seen. Some things were better left buried. I understand that, Delilah said quietly. My father fought too, says the same thing about settling. They rode on. The landscape began to change, the open grassland giving way to more trees, and then Marcus saw fences in the distance, well-maintained and strong. Beyond them, cattle grazed peacefully, taking advantage of the brief appearance of sun to dry themselves off. And beyond that, a ranch house came into view. It was a solid structure, built to last, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Outbuildings clustered around it like chicks around a hen, a large barn, a bunkhouse, a smokehouse, corrals, and paddocks. It spoke of prosperity and hard work, of a family that had made something real out here in the wilderness. This is impressive, Marcus said honestly. You have built something good here. We have tried. Delilah led them toward the barn. Father will be inside probably, working on tack. He likes to keep busy. They dismounted and led the horses into the barn, which was warm and dry and smelled of hay and leather. A man emerged from one of the stalls, tall and grizzled, with the same hazel eyes as his daughter. He looked at Marcus with the cautious appraisal of a man who had learned to judge character quickly. Father, this is Marcus Yates, the trapper from Copper Creek, Delilah said, stripping the saddle from her mare with easy efficiency. His horse bolted in the storm. I helped get him back. Helped is putting it modestly, Marcus said, extending his hand. Sir, your daughter lassoed my stallion from 40 yards out and walked him back to me like it was nothing. Saved me from a very long walk and possibly freezing to death. The older man's expression warmed considerably. He shook Marcus's hand with a grip that was still iron-string strong despite his years. Delilah Oakes. Any man who appreciates my daughter's skills is welcome here. She is the best hand with a rope in 3 territories, though I am biased. He looked at Delilah with obvious pride. You bringing him up for supper? If that is acceptable, more than acceptable. Danny shot a deer yesterday, and we have more venison than we can eat before it turns. Go on up to the house and get dry. Delilah will show you where you can wash up. The ranch house interior was as well maintained as the exterior, with comfortable furniture and colorful blankets that spoke of a woman's touch, probably the late Mrs. Oakes. Delilah showed Marcus to a small washroom where he could clean up, providing him with a towel and a dry shirt that must have belonged to her father or brother. When he emerged, feeling more human, he found the main room dominated by a large table already set for dinner. A young man of perhaps 17 was helping bring food from the kitchen, and he looked at Marcus with open curiosity. "You are the mountain man Dell roped a horse for?" he asked. "That is impressive. She has been practicing her long throws. Practicing paid off." Marcus said, "You must be Danny. Daniel Oakes, but everyone calls me Danny." The young man grinned. He had his father's height but had not filled out yet, all long limbs and youthful energy. "Did she really get your horse from 40 yards?" "Every bit of 40 yards, Marcus confirmed, in the rain no less." Delilah emerged from what must have been her room, having changed into a clean shirt and brushed out her hair. It fell in dark waves past her shoulders, and Marcus found himself staring before he caught himself and looked away. She was striking, there was no denying it, with a natural beauty that needed no artifice or fancy clothing to shine through. Dinner was magnificent. Roasted venison with potatoes and carrots, fresh bread with butter, greens from their garden. Marcus could not remember the last time he had eaten so well. He said so, and Douglas laughed. "The benefits of civilization," the older man said. "Though I suspect you prefer your solitary life up in the mountains." "I do," Marcus admitted. "Or I did. This is reminding me there are benefits to company as well." They talked through the meal, easy conversation that ranged from the weather to the price of beef to the territorial politics that seemed always to be shifting. Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he had not done around people in years. The Oakes family had a warmth to them, a genuine kindness that made their hospitality feel natural rather than obligatory. "You are welcome to stay the night," Douglas said when the meal was finished. "We have room in the bunkhouse, and your horse could use rest after his adventure." Marcus was about to politely decline when he looked outside and saw that full darkness had fallen. The storm had left the night moonless and black as pitch, and he would be navigating by feel through unfamiliar country. Also, if he was honest with himself, he did not want to leave yet. Something about this family, about this place, called to him. "I would appreciate that," he said. "Thank you." He helped clean up after dinner, insisting despite Delilah's protests that he earn his keep. They worked side by side at the wash basin, her washing and him drying, and Marcus was intensely aware of her presence beside him. She smelled like soap and leather and something floral, maybe lavender. When their hands accidentally touched over a plate, he felt a jolt go through him like lightning. "Thank you again," he said quietly, "for saving my horse. I owe you more than a meal can repay." "You owe me nothing," Delilah said, equally quiet. "But if you wanted to stay for breakfast as well, I would not object to the company." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. Interest. Attraction. The same pull he was feeling, reflected back at him. "I would like that," he managed to say. The bunkhouse was empty of other workers, and Douglas explained that they only hired extra hands during roundup and branding season. Marcus made himself comfortable in one of the bunks, his saddle and gear nearby, and lay awake for a long time listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in their paddock, the wind picking up again, whistling around the corners of the building. He thought about Delilah Oakes and her steady hands and warm eyes. He thought about how she had ridden out into the storm without hesitation to help a stranger. He thought about the way she moved, confident and capable, completely at home in her own skin. And he thought about how, for the first time in 8 years, he was questioning his choice to live alone in the mountains. Morning came bright and clear, the storm having scrubbed the sky clean. Marcus woke with the dawn, an old habit from his trapping days, and found Douglas already up and working in the barn. "Sleep well?" the older man asked, forking hay to the horses. "Very well." Marcus grabbed another fork and helped. "You have a good operation here. We try. It is not easy, just the three of us, but we manage." Douglas paused in his work. "Can I speak plainly with you, Marcus?" "Of course. My daughter is a remarkable woman. She can outride, outtrope, and outwork most men I know. But folks in town look at her sideways because she wears trousers and does not simper or flutter her eyelashes." Douglas met Marcus's eyes directly. "She is 24 years old, and she has not had a man look at her the way you did last night in a long time. I saw something there. I am just saying, if you are interested, you should know that she is worth 10 of the fancy town girls who would not know one end of a cow from another." Marcus felt his ears heat up. "Sir, I assure you I have no intention of what? Courting my daughter." Douglas smiled. "Why not? You are a good man. I can tell. Honest work, respectful, and you clearly know how to survive in this country. Those are qualities worth having. Just think about it." He returned to his work, leaving Marcus standing there with his mind spinning. Court Delilah Oakes? The idea was both terrifying and appealing in equal measure. He barely knew her, but what he did know drew him like a magnet. Her competence, her kindness, her strength. The way she had looked at him across the dinner table, like he was someone worth knowing. Breakfast was another excellent meal, flapjacks with syrup and bacon and eggs. Delilah was quieter this morning, and Marcus wondered if her father had said something to her as well. Danny filled the silence with cheerful chatter about the horses he was training and his plans for expanding their herd. After breakfast, Marcus knew he should leave. His traps needed checking, and he had furs to prepare for the winter trading season. But he found himself lingering, helping Douglas repair a section of fence, then helping Danny work with a young gelding in the corral. Every time he looked up, he found Delilah nearby, watching him with those remarkable eyes. Finally, as noon approached, he knew he could delay no longer. He saddled his stallion, checked his gear, and prepared to ride out. The whole family came to see him off, which felt both awkward and touching. "Thank you for your hospitality," Marcus said formally. "It has been a long time since I have enjoyed company so much." "You are welcome back any time," Douglas said, shaking his hand. "We mean that. Safe travels," Danny added. Delilah stepped forward. "Marcus, would you walk with me to the gate?" They walked in silence, leading their horses, until they were out of earshot of the house. Delilah stopped and turned to face him, and Marcus saw both nervousness and determination in her expression. "I know you prefer the solitary life," she said, "and I respect that. But I also know that yesterday, when we were together, I felt something, and I think you did too." Marcus's throat went dry. "I did," he admitted. "The winter trading fair is in 6 weeks in Malad City, Idaho," Delilah continued. "We always go to sell cattle and horses. Will you be there?" "I always trade my furs there," Marcus said. "It is the biggest market in the region. Then perhaps we could meet, properly, I mean. Not just as strangers who helped each other, but as people who might want to know each other better." She took a breath. "I am being too forward. My father always says I should be more subtle, but I have never seen the point in pretending. I like you, Marcus Yates. I would like to see you again." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen and closed for a very long time. "I would like that very much," he said. "I will find you in Malad City. Promise?" "I promise." Delilah smiled, that transformative smile that lit up her whole face. "Good. Then I will see you in 6 weeks. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and light, and then she was mounting her horse and riding back to the ranch before Marcus could do more than stand there like a stunned fool. He touched his cheek where her lips had been, feeling the warmth still there, and grinned like an idiot. The ride back to his cabin took most of the day, and Marcus spent every mile thinking about Delilah Oakes. He had sworn off women after the war, after seeing what violence and death did to families. He had decided that a solitary life was safer, simpler, less likely to end in heartbreak. But that had been 8 years ago, and maybe he had been alone long enough. His cabin was exactly as he had left it, a small solid structure tucked into the trees near a fast-running creek. He had built it himself, log by log, and it had everything he needed: a fireplace, a bed, storage for his furs and supplies, a small area for cooking. It had been enough for 8 years. Now, coming back to it after a night at the Oakes Ranch, it felt empty. Marcus threw himself into work, checking his trap lines, preparing his gear for the coming winter, hunting and preserving meat. But every day, his thoughts returned to Delilah. The way she sat a horse, the strength in her hands, her laugh, which he had only heard a few times but wanted to hear again and again, the gold in her hazel eyes. 3 weeks passed. Marcus had a good collection of furs, mostly beaver and some marten, which would fetch excellent prices at the trading fair. He also had venison and elk meat to trade, and various herbs and roots he had collected that were valued for medicinal purposes. He would do well this year, assuming the prices held. He was examining a beaver pelt for quality when he heard horses approaching. Marcus instantly went on alert. Visitors were rare up here, and unexpected visitors could mean trouble. He stepped out of his cabin with his rifle in hand, then relaxed when he saw who it was. Douglas and Danny Oakes rode up to his clearing, looking tired and worried. "Marcus," Douglas said without preamble, "we need your help." "What happened?" Marcus lowered the rifle. "Delilah went out 3 days ago to check on a report of cattle rustlers in our north pasture. She never came back." Douglas's voice cracked slightly. "We have been searching, but we lost her trail in the rocky country. Danny remembered you saying you trap up here, and we thought maybe you know the land well enough to help us find her." Marcus's blood ran cold. 3 days in the wilderness, possibly injured. possibly captured by rustlers. "Tell me everything," he said. Douglas explained quickly. A neighbor had sent word of seeing suspicious men in the area, possibly scouts for a rustling operation. Delilah had ridden out alone to investigate, despite her father's protests that she should wait for backup. She had taken her rifle and her rope and enough supplies for a day trip. That had been 3 days ago. "We followed her trail to the North Ridge," Danny said. His young face was drawn with worry and exhaustion. "But then it just vanished into the rocks. It is like she disappeared." "Show me where," Marcus said. He was already saddling his stallion, grabbing his tracking gear and his own rifle. "We will find her." They rode hard, reaching the North Ridge by mid-afternoon. Marcus studied the ground carefully, reading the signs that the Oakes men had missed. Delilah's paint mare had definitely come this way, and she had been moving at a steady pace, not running. That was good. It meant she had not been fleeing from something. Then he found where the trail diverged. 2 sets of hoofprints split off from Delilah's, flanking her. Marcus's jaw tightened. She had been followed, and she had probably not known it until it was too late. "She was herded," he said grimly. 2 riders, probably working together. They drove her north into the high country. "Why?" Douglas demanded. "What would rustlers want with my daughter?" "Leverage," Marcus said. "If they are planning to steal your cattle, having you worried about your daughter keeps you busy and off balance." He swung back into his saddle. "But they made a mistake. This is my country. I know every trail, every hiding place, every cave and canyon. We will find her." They followed the trail north and east, up into increasingly rough terrain. Marcus read the signs as they went. A broken branch here, a scuff mark on a rock there, a place where horses had stopped to drink from a stream. Delilah was leaving markers when she could, subtle things that most people would miss. She was smart even in danger. Night fell, and they made a cold camp, not wanting to advertise their presence with a fire. Marcus barely slept, his mind churning with worry and plans. Delilah had been missing for 3 days now. If she was injured, if she was cold, if those men had hurt her, he could not let himself think about that. He had to believe she was alive and fighting. That was the woman he had seen, the woman who rode out into storms to help strangers. She would not give up easily. Dawn came, and they were riding again. The trail led them higher into the mountains, into country so rough that Marcus had only been through here a few times himself. This was wilderness in the truest sense, where a person could disappear forever. Then Marcus heard something. He held up his hand, stopping the others, and listened intently. There, faint but unmistakable, a horse's neigh. They moved forward cautiously now, Marcus leading. The trail wound through a narrow canyon, and as they emerged from it, Marcus saw a small box canyon ahead, the kind with only one way in or out. Perfect for keeping someone trapped. And there, near the back of the canyon, were 3 horses. One was Delilah's paint mare. The other 2 were ranger animals, probably stolen somewhere, and they were tied to a makeshift picket line. Near them was a rough camp, a fire ring, some blankets, supplies, and sitting with her back against a rock, her hands bound but her head held high, was Delilah. Marcus felt relief so profound it nearly knocked him from his saddle. She was alive. She looked tired and dirty, but she was whole and breathing and glaring at the 2 men who were standing near the fire, arguing about something. "Stay here," Marcus whispered to Douglas and Danny. "I will circle around and come at them from the side. When you hear me shout, ride in fast." He did not wait for agreement, just slipped from his saddle and began working his way around the canyon rim. It was slow work, moving quietly through the rocks, but Marcus had hunted these mountains for years. He knew how to move without sound. He positioned himself above and to the left of the rustlers' camp, close enough to hear their conversation now. "Should have just left her," one man was saying. He was short and stocky with a mean face. "Now we got her father probably gathering every rancher in the territory to come after us. We can use her," the other argued. He was taller, with a scar across his cheek. "Get them to back off while we move the cattle. Then we let her go. If we let her go, she will identify us. So we do not let her go." Marcus had heard enough. He stood up from behind the rocks and aimed his rifle at the taller man's chest. "You will let her go right now," he said, his voice carrying across the camp. "Or I will put bullets in both of you." The rustlers spun around, grabbing for their weapons, but they were too slow. Douglas and Danny came charging into the canyon on horseback, their own rifles drawn, and suddenly the rustlers were surrounded. "Drop your guns," Douglas commanded, and his voice had the authority of a man who would not hesitate to shoot. "Now." The rustlers looked at each other, calculated the odds, and wisely decided to surrender. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Marcus scrambled down from the rocks and ran to Delilah, pulling out his knife to cut the ropes binding her wrists. "Marcus," she said, and her voice was hoarse but steady. "I knew you would come. Are you hurt?" He examined her quickly, checking for injuries. "Just thirsty and angry." She rubbed her wrists where the ropes had chafed them. "They caught me by surprise 2 days ago, drove me up here at gunpoint. I have been waiting for a chance to escape. But they have been watching me constantly." "You are safe now," Marcus said. He wanted to pull her into his arms but restrained himself. Her father was watching after all. Delilah had no such restraint. She threw her arms around Marcus's neck and hugged him fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered against his ear. "Thank you for finding me." Marcus let himself hold her for just a moment, feeling her solid weight against him, her heartbeat steady and strong. Then he released her and stepped back, though it was one of the hardest things he had ever done. They tied up the rustlers securely and loaded them onto their own horses. The ride back to the Oakes ranch took the rest of the day, and by the time they arrived it was full dark and everyone was exhausted. But Delilah was safe, and that was all that mattered. "Stay the night," Douglas said to Marcus as they were putting away the horses. "Please, I cannot thank you enough for what you did today." "You do not need to thank me," Marcus said. "I would do it again 100 times. I know you would. That is why I am asking you to stay." This time Marcus had his own room in the main house, a small guest room that was clearly kept ready for visitors. He washed up and changed into clean clothes borrowed from Douglas, then joined the family for a late dinner. The mood was celebratory despite the exhaustion, and Delilah was clearly the center of attention, with Danny pressing her for details of her captivity and Douglas just watching her with profound relief. After dinner, Marcus stepped out onto the porch for some air. The night was cool and clear, with a million stars overhead. He heard the door open behind him and knew without turning who it was. "Thank you," Delilah said, coming to stand beside him at the railing. "I already said it, but I want to say it again. You saved my life today." "Your father and brother helped," Marcus pointed out. "But you tracked me, you found me when they could not." She turned to look at him, and in the starlight her eyes were luminous. "I was so scared, Marcus. Not of those men, really, but of never seeing you again. Of missing our meeting in Malad City." Marcus turned to face her fully. "I would have torn these mountains apart looking for you," he said quietly. "When your father told me you were missing, I felt something I have not felt in years. Real fear. The kind that makes you realize what matters." "What matters?" Delilah asked softly. "You," Marcus said. "You matter to me, Delilah Oakes, and I have only known you for a few weeks." That should be impossible, but it is true. She reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "It is not impossible," she said. "I feel it too. Like I have been waiting for you without knowing I was waiting." They stood there in the starlight, holding hands, and Marcus felt the last of his walls crumble. He had been alone for so long, convinced that solitude was what he wanted. But this, standing here with Delilah, feeling her warmth and strength beside him, was better than any lonely cabin in the mountains. "The trading fair is in 3 weeks, Delilah said. "Will you still meet me there?" "Wild horses could not keep me away," Marcus promised. She smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stayed like that for a long time, just being together under the stars. The next morning, Marcus woke early and found Douglas already up, making coffee in the kitchen. The older man poured 2 cups and handed one to Marcus, then gestured for him to follow outside. They walked to the corral where the horses were starting to wake up, shaking off sleep and nickering for their breakfast. Douglas leaned against the fence and took a long drink of his coffee before speaking. "My daughter is falling in love with you," he said bluntly. "Maybe already has fallen. I see it in how she looks at you." Marcus felt his heart start to race. "Sir." I am not objecting," Douglas interrupted. "Like I said before, I think you are a good man. But I need to know your intentions. Are you going to break her heart, Marcus? Because if you are, I would rather you leave now and never come back. Clean break is better than drawn-out pain." "I will not break her heart," Marcus said firmly. "I cannot promise I will be perfect, or that I know how to do this because I have been alone for a long time. But I can promise I will try. I will try to be the man she deserves." Douglas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is all any of us can do. Try." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Welcome to the family, son, unofficially at least. I suspect you will make it official before too long." Marcus rode back to his cabin later that morning with his head spinning. Welcome to the family. The idea was both terrifying and wonderful. He had not had a family in so long. After the war, he had cut ties with everyone, convinced he was better off alone. But maybe he had just been scared. Scared of losing people, scared of failing them, scared of all the ways love could turn into pain. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur. Marcus prepared his furs for trading, made himself as presentable as possible given his wilderness lifestyle, and counted down the days until the fair. He had never been one for social gatherings, preferring to trade his goods quickly and return to the mountains. This year would be different. Finally, the day came. Marcus packed up his furs and supplies, loaded everything onto his stallion and a pack mule he used for such occasions, and started the long journey to Lassoed City, Idaho. The town was about 3 days' ride south, and Marcus took his time. Enjoying the late autumn weather, he arrived in Lassoed City to find it transformed. The usually quiet town was bustling with activity, tents and stalls set up everywhere, livestock penned in temporary corrals, and people everywhere. The fall trading fair was the biggest event of the year, drawing ranchers, trappers, traders, and merchants from across 3 territories. Marcus set up his furs for display in the area designated for trappers and began the business of trading. His furs were high quality, and he quickly had interested buyers. But his mind was not on business. He kept scanning the crowd, looking for a dark-haired woman with hazel eyes. He found her on the second day, not by looking but by hearing. A crowd had gathered in one of the open areas, and people were cheering and shouting. Marcus pushed his way through and saw what had drawn everyone's attention. Delilah was putting on a demonstration of roping skills. She had set up targets at various distances, and she was lassoing them one after another with casual precision. 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, she hit every target dead center. The crowd applauded wildly. "That is Delilah Oakes' daughter," someone near Marcus said. "Best hand with a rope in the territory. She won the competition 3 years running. She is remarkable." Marcus agreed, unable to take his eyes off her. Delilah finished her demonstration with a flourish, bowing to the crowd's applause. Then she looked up and saw Marcus standing there, and her whole face lit up with joy. She dropped the rope and ran toward him, and Marcus met her halfway. "You came," she said, slightly breathless. "I promised," Marcus said. "Though I see you have been busy entertaining the crowds, just showing off a little." She grinned up at him. "Are you finished with your trading for the day?" "I am now." They walked through the fair together, and Marcus felt like he was seeing it with new eyes. Everything was more colorful, more interesting, more alive with Delilah beside him. She introduced him to people she knew, and Marcus found himself being drawn into a community he had avoided for years. But with Delilah's hand in his, it did not feel overwhelming. It felt right. They ate dinner at one of the food stalls, simple fare but delicious, and then Delilah led him away from the crowds to a quieter area on the edge of town. There was a small park here, with trees and benches, and they sat down together as the sun began to set. "I missed you," Delilah said softly. "These 3 weeks felt like 3 years. "I know what you mean," Marcus said. He had been thinking about her constantly, counting the hours until he could see her again. "Delilah, I need to ask you something. Anything. What do you want? From life, I mean. What are your dreams?" He needed to know. Needed to understand if what he could offer would be enough. Delilah thought about it for a moment. "I want to keep working the ranch," she said finally. "I love that life, the work and the animals and the land. But I also want partnership. Someone to share it all with, to work alongside, to build something with. I want love, Marcus, real love, the kind that lasts." "I want that too," Marcus said. "I just never let myself believe I could have it. After the war, I thought I was too broken, too damaged by what I had seen and done. So I went to the mountains and told myself I preferred to be alone, and now I know I was lying to myself." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I want to be with you, Delilah. I want to try to build the kind of life you are talking about. But I do not know how to do it. I have been alone for so long." "Then we will figure it out together," Delilah said. She cupped his face in her hands, her calloused palms warm against his skin. "I am not asking for perfection, Marcus. I am just asking for honesty and effort in you." Marcus kissed her then, properly, for the first time. Her lips were soft and warm, and she kissed him back with an enthusiasm that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I am courting you," Marcus said. "Officially." "Good," Delilah said, smiling that beautiful smile, "because I am very much being courted." They stayed at the fair for the rest of the week, and Marcus found himself enjoying the social aspects he had always avoided before. With Delilah beside him, everything was easier. She introduced him to the other ranchers. many of whom knew him by reputation but had never spoken to him before. He found himself making connections, establishing relationships that could be useful for future trading. But more than that, he found himself being happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way he had not been since before the war. Delilah's laughter was infectious, her joy in simple things reminding him that life could be more than just survival. They danced at the fair's social evening, Marcus feeling clumsy and awkward until Delilah whispered that he was doing fine and just to follow her lead. They watched the horse races and the shooting competitions, and Delilah entered the roping competition and won handily, to no one's surprise. On the last night of the fair, Marcus and Delilah climbed a hill overlooking the town, watching the lights twinkle below them and listening to the distant sounds of music and celebration. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "When the fair is over?" "I go back to the ranch," Delilah said. "And you go back to your cabin in the mountains." "That is not what I want," Marcus said. "I want to be near you, but I do not know how to make that work with the life I have built." "Then maybe it is time to build a different life," Delilah suggested gently. "You are a trapper, but you could also be a rancher. We need help at the ranch, and you know the mountains better than anyone. You could guide our decisions about where to graze cattle in the high pastures, help us avoid predators, track rustlers. You could keep trapping if you wanted, in the winter when things are slow." Marcus turned the idea over in his mind. Leave his solitary cabin and move to the Oakes Ranch, work alongside Delilah and her family, build something permanent instead of just surviving season to season. It was terrifying and tempting in equal measure. "Your father would be all right with that?" he asked. "My father likes you," Delilah said. "And more importantly, he respects you. He sees you as someone who could be a true partner, not just hired help. We could build something together, Marcus, all of us." "I need some time to think about it," Marcus said. "This is a big decision." "I know. Take all the time you need." She kissed him softly. "I will be waiting when you decide." Marcus rode back to his cabin alone when the fair ended, but his mind was full of Delilah and her family and the life they were offering him. He spent 2 weeks at his cabin, checking his traps and thinking. The work that had always been satisfying now felt empty. The solitude that had been peaceful now felt lonely. He realized that he had already made his decision. He had made it the moment Delilah suggested they build a life together. Everything since then had just been fear talking, the old fear of connection and loss and pain. But Marcus was tired of being afraid. He was tired of being alone. He wanted more. It took him 3 days to close up his cabin properly, storing his trapping equipment and preparing the place for a potentially long absence. He kept it intact, just in case, but deep down he knew he would not be coming back here to live. This chapter of his life was over. He rode to the Oakes Ranch with everything he owned packed onto his stallion and mule, feeling nervous and excited and terrified all at once. When he crested the final hill and saw the ranch spread out below him, smoke rising from the chimney and cattle grazing peacefully in their pastures, he felt a sense of coming home that nearly overwhelmed him. Delilah saw him first. She was working in the corral with a young horse, and when she looked up and saw Marcus riding in with all his gear, she let out a whoop of joy that brought Douglas and Danny running from the barn. "You came," she said, running to meet him. "You are staying?" "If you will have me," Marcus said, dismounting. "I want to try this, Delilah. I want to try building a life here with you." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." Douglas shook his hand solemnly. "Welcome to the ranch, Marcus. We are glad to have you." Danny just grinned. "Does this mean we are going to be brothers? Because that would be excellent." "One step at a time," Marcus said, but he was grinning too. The transition was not entirely smooth. Marcus was used to working alone at his own pace, and integrating into a family operation took adjustment. He and Douglas had different opinions about how to handle various ranch tasks, and there were a few tense moments until they learned to communicate better. Danny was enthusiastic but inexperienced, and Marcus had to learn patience when teaching him tracking and wilderness skills. But with Delilah, everything clicked. They worked together seamlessly, whether they were rounding up cattle or mending fences or just doing the daily chores that kept the ranch running. Marcus had never had a true partner before, someone who matched his skills and shared the load equally. It was revelation. The winter came early that year, bringing snow and bitter cold by November. Marcus used his knowledge of the mountains to help move the cattle to protected valleys before the worst storms hit, potentially saving dozens of animals. He showed Danny how to set traps for predators that were threatening their livestock, teaching the young man the skills he had learned over years in the wilderness, and he spent every evening with Delilah, talking and laughing and falling more deeply in love. Christmas came, and Marcus experienced his first real holiday celebration in nearly a decade. Delilah cooked a feast and they exchanged simple gifts. Marcus gave Delilah a necklace he had made from polished river stones, and she gave him a new pair of leather gloves lined with rabbit fur that she had sewn herself. They were the most precious things either of them owned. On Christmas night, with snow falling softly outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, Marcus asked Douglas for permission to marry his daughter. The older man's eyes got suspiciously bright, and he pulled Marcus into a rough hug. "I was wondering when you would get around to asking," Douglas said. "Yes, son, 1,000 times yes." Marcus proposed to Delilah on New Year's Eve as they stood on the porch watching the stars. He did not have a fancy ring, just a simple band of silver he had traded for in town, but when he dropped to one knee and asked her to be his wife, Delilah said yes before he even finished the question. "I love you," she said, pulling him to his feet and kissing him. "I have loved you since you looked at me like I was extraordinary for roping your horse." "You are extraordinary," Marcus said. "You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known." They were married in the spring of 1879 in a simple ceremony at the ranch with family and friends in attendance. Delilah wore a dress of deep blue that matched the Montana sky, and Marcus wore his best clothes with his hair trimmed, but still long enough to brush his shoulders. Douglas walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle, and Danny served as Marcus's best man. The vows they spoke were traditional, but when Delilah promised to love Marcus through all the days of her life, her voice rang with absolute certainty. And when Marcus promised to honor and cherish her, to be her partner in all things, he meant every word with his whole heart. The ranch prospered over the next years. With Marcus's help, they expanded their operation, buying more land and increasing their herds. Marcus's knowledge of the high country allowed them to utilize grazing land that other ranchers considered inaccessible, giving them an advantage in the competitive cattle market. He also continued to trap in the winter, bringing in additional income from furs. But now he came home every night to a warm house and a loving wife. Delilah gave birth to their first child in the spring of 1880, a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's hazel eyes. They named him Matthew Douglas Yates, and Marcus held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "I never thought I would have this," he told Delilah as she recovered in their bed, their baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. "A family, a home, someone to love this much. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Delilah corrected gently. "That is how partnerships work." Douglas doted on his grandson, and Danny took to being an uncle with enthusiasm. The ranch house, which had felt too large and too quiet after Mrs. Oakes passed away, was once again filled with life and laughter and love. 2 years later, Delilah gave birth to a daughter, Emma Rose Yates, who had her mother's strength and her father's quiet intensity from the moment she was born. Marcus had never imagined himself as a father, but he took to the role with surprising ease. He taught his children to ride almost before they could walk, to respect the land and the animals, to be honest and hardworking and kind. As the children grew, Marcus often found himself thinking back to that stormy day when his horse had bolted and Delilah had roped it from 40 yards away. If not for that moment, if she had not been checking her north pasture that day, if she had not been skilled enough to catch a terrified stallion in the rain, none of this would exist. His entire life would be different. "Do you ever miss it?" Delilah asked him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Matthew and Emma play in the yard while the sun set. "The mountains, the solitary life?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "I thought I needed that isolation to be happy, but I was wrong. I just needed to heal, and I needed time to be ready for something more. You gave me that. You gave me purpose and partnership and love, and I would not trade this for anything." "Good," Delilah said, leaning against his shoulder, "because you are stuck with us now." Marcus wrapped his arm around his wife and watched his children play, feeling a contentment so deep it seemed to fill him up from the inside. He had fought in a war, witnessed terrible things, run from his pain into the wilderness. He had lived alone in the mountains for 8 years, convinced that was the only way he could survive. But survival, he had learned, was not the same as living, and living meant connection, family, love. It meant building something with someone else, combining your strength with theirs to create something neither of you could make alone. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy. Douglas grew older and gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Marcus and Delilah, content to be a grandfather and advisor rather than a boss. Danny eventually married as well, bringing his wife to live on the ranch, and they expanded the operation even further to accommodate the growing family. Marcus and Delilah had 2 more children over the years, another son and another daughter, filling their home with noise and chaos and boundless love. Marcus taught all of them his wilderness skills, and Delilah taught them her roping techniques, and together they raised children who were confident, capable, and kind. On their 10th anniversary, Marcus and Delilah took a rare day away from the ranch and rode up into the high country together, just the 2 of them. They found a beautiful meadow filled with wildflowers and dismounted, letting their horses graze while they sat together in the sun. "Do you remember what you said to me the night I proposed?" Marcus asked. "About building something together?" "I remember," Delilah said. "I have been thinking about that a lot lately, about what we have built." Marcus gestured broadly, encompassing not just the meadow, but everything beyond it: the ranch, their family, their life. "It is more than I ever dreamed possible. We are not finished building yet," Delilah pointed out with a smile. "We have years ahead of us still, decades. If we are lucky, then I am the luckiest man alive," Marcus said. He pulled her close and kissed her, still feeling that spark that had ignited the first time their hands touched over a dinner plate 10 years ago. "Because every day with you is a gift." They lay back in the wildflowers, holding hands and watching clouds drift across the endless blue sky, and Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from soldier to hermit to husband and father, from isolation to integration, from survival to true living. His horse had bolted that stormy day a decade ago, and Delilah Oakes had lassoed it from 40 yards away and walked it back to him. But in saving his horse, she had also saved him. She had reached across the distance, caught him when he was running, and led him home. And home, Marcus had learned, was not a place. It was a person. It was partnership and love and family. It was the life you built together, log by log, day by day, moment by moment. It was everything. As the years turned into decades, the Yates family became a fixture in the community. Their ranch was known for quality cattle and horses, but more than that, it was known as a place where people were treated fairly and honestly. Marcus, who had once avoided human contact, became known as someone you could trust, someone whose word was his bond. Delilah continued to be legendary for her roping skills, and she taught workshops for other ranchers who wanted to learn from the best. Their children grew into strong, capable adults. Matthew took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, showing a natural talent for business and livestock management. Emma married a young rancher from a neighboring spread, and together they started their own operation with help from the family. The younger 2 children pursued different paths, one becoming a teacher, one a skilled craftsman, but they all remained close to the family ranch. Douglas Oakes passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. He had lived to see his family prosper, to know that the ranch he had built would continue for generations. Marcus helped lower him into the ground on the hillside, overlooking the ranch, and as he stood there with Delilah's hand in his, he silently thanked the old man for welcoming a lonely mountain man into his family all those years ago. Danny ran the ranch alongside Marcus and Matthew for many more years, a partnership that proved both profitable and personally rewarding. The 3 men worked together seamlessly, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. And through it all, Delilah remained the heart of the operation, the one everyone turned to for advice and comfort, and her particular brand of practical wisdom. Marcus and Delilah celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1904, their 30th in 1909, their 35th in 1914. Each year brought new challenges: droughts and harsh winters, disease among the livestock, the changing economics of ranching as the Wild West became less wild. But they faced everything together, as partners, and somehow that made even the difficulties manageable. On a warm summer evening in 1918, Marcus and Delilah sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were in their 60s now, with silver threading through their hair and lines carved into their faces by decades of sun and wind and laughter. Their children were grown with families of their own, their grandchildren were starting to have children, and the ranch continued to thrive under Matthew's capable management. "Do you know what I was thinking about today?" Delilah asked, rocking gently in her chair. "What is that?" Marcus reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after 40 years of practice. That storm, the one where your horse bolted." She smiled at the memory. "I remember seeing you standing there on that hill, soaking wet and looking so lost. And I remember thinking that I wanted to help you, that something about you called to me even then." "You lassoed my horse from 40 yards away in the pouring rain," Marcus said. "I knew right then that you were extraordinary. It was a good throw," Delilah admitted modestly. "But I think it was more than that. I think we were meant to find each other, Marcus. I think everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to." "I believe that too," Marcus said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You saved more than my horse that day. You saved me. I was so lost back then, so convinced that isolation was the only answer. You showed me a different way." "We saved each other," Delilah said. "That is what love does. It makes both people better, stronger, more whole." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear their grandchildren playing. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. Marcus thought about the scared young soldier he had been, the traumatized veteran who had run to the mountains to hide from his pain. He thought about the 8 lonely years he had spent in that cabin, convinced he was content. And he thought about the day everything changed, the day a woman with hazel eyes and a 40-yard rope throw had walked his horse back to him, and in doing so, had led him to a life beyond anything he had ever imagined. "I love you," he said to Delilah, as he had said countless times over the past 4 decades. "Thank you for roping my horse." Delilah laughed, the sound as bright and warm as it had been when she was 24. "I love you too," she said. "And you are very welcome." They sat together on the porch as darkness fell, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss and their wedding vows and every important moment of their life together. And Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he had found what every person searches for: a place to belong, a person to love, and a life that mattered. The Wild West was changing, becoming more civilized with each passing year, but here on the ranch some things remained constant: family, partnership, love that endured through all the challenges life could throw at it, and the memory of a stormy day when fate intervened in the form of a bolting horse and a woman skilled enough to catch it. Years continued their steady march forward. Marcus and Delilah celebrated their 40th anniversary, then their 45th. They slowed down as age demanded, spending more time on the porch and less time riding the range, but they were always together. Their children joked that you rarely saw one without the other, that they had become so intertwined over the decades that they functioned as a single unit. On a spring morning in 1925, Marcus woke early as he always did, despite being in his 70s. He looked over at Delilah sleeping beside him, her hair silver now but her face peaceful in sleep, and felt the same surge of love he had felt every morning for nearly 50 years. She was the best decision he had ever made, the best thing that had ever happened to him, the reason his life had meaning beyond mere survival. He rose carefully, not wanting to wake her, and made coffee in the kitchen. Through the window, he could see the ranch awakening to a new day. Cattle moving toward fresh pasture, horses nickering in their corrals, the first rays of sunlight touching the mountains in the distance. Matthew would be up soon to begin the day's work, and several of the grandchildren would arrive to help as they often did. But for now, in this quiet moment before the day truly began, Marcus just stood at the window with his coffee and thought about how far he had come. From that cabin in the mountains to this ranch full of life and love. From a man running from his past to a man who had built a future. From someone who thought he needed to be alone to someone who could not imagine life without his family around him. Delilah appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her robe, her eyes still soft with sleep. "You are up early," she said. "Could not sleep anymore," Marcus said. "Too much to be grateful for." She came to stand beside him at the window, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. They stood like that for a long moment, watching the sun rise over the ranch they had built together, over the life they had created from nothing but hard work and love and partnership. "Do you remember what you told me once?" Marcus asked. "That we would figure it out together?" "I remember. You were right, we figured it out. Every challenge, every problem, every joy and sorrow, we faced it together and came through stronger." He kissed the top of her head. "I could not have asked for a better partner, Delilah. You have been my compass, my anchor, my home." "And you have been mine," Delilah said softly. "My mountain man who came down from the high country and stayed." They stood together in the growing light, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other every day for nearly half a century, who had built something that would last long after they were gone. The ranch would continue, passed down through the generations. Their children and grandchildren would tell the story of how Marcus and Delilah met, how she had roped his runaway horse from an impossible distance and changed both their lives forever. It was a good story. But more than that, it was a good life. A life full of love and purpose and meaning. A life that proved that even the most damaged, most lost person could find their way home if they were brave enough to accept help when it was offered. Marcus had been running when Delilah found him, running from pain and loss and fear. She had caught him as surely as she had caught his bolting horse, and she had led him to safety, to family, to love. And in return, he had given her everything he was and everything he had, building a partnership that was as strong and enduring as the mountains themselves. As the sun climbed higher and the ranch came fully alive with the sounds of a new day beginning, Marcus and Delilah finished their coffee and prepared to join their family. There was work to be done, as there always was on a ranch. Fences to mend, animals to tend, 1,000 small tasks that kept the operation running smoothly. But they would do it together, as they had done everything for the past 47 years. Together, always together. That was their secret, the key to the life they had built. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, but simply choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through every season of life. And when their time finally came, when age and illness eventually claimed them as it claimed everyone, they would go together too, as they had done everything else. Their children and grandchildren would gather to celebrate their lives, to tell stories about the mountain man and the ranch woman who had found each other on a stormy day and built an empire of love. But that was still years away. For now, on this beautiful spring morning in 1925, Marcus and Delilah Yates walked out onto their porch hand in hand, ready to face whatever the day brought, secure in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. They had built something that would endure, something that mattered. They had built a home, and it all started because a horse bolted and a remarkable woman knew exactly how to bring it back.